So for anyone who doesn't know me already, my name is Claire and I'm one of the TAs at Launch School, also a student, and I'm in the front end of the core curriculum. This is the third in a series of introductory workshops on Python. These workshops are designed to complement Launch School's programming and backend prep Python course. As introductory sessions, these are going to give you a flavour of Launch School and what to expect, but they're not a substitute for working through the course materials. So just see this as, just an introduction. And therefore don't worry about taking notes because everything is in the free Python book. So let's have a look at what we're going to be covering today. I see no one shared their favourite sports team, so I'll think of a better question next week. Tour de France has been pretty exciting this year. My husband loves watching Tour de France. I can always tell when it's on because he's sneaking off and watching it, so I know that is on at the moment. I always find it a little bit scary to watch people have accidents and things, but it does seem quite exciting. Florida Panthers won their first Stanley Cup. Well done. Congratulations, Florida Panthers. Been following the Romania Chess Classic for the last few days. So no teams, but individual players. I'll have to get my daughter to look at that. She loves chess. Yeah, didn't even know that was going on. I will get onto that tomorrow and get her to have a look. Thanks. Okay, so what was I saying? Right, this is what we're going to be doing this week. So we're looking at flow control and loops. And then the particular topics we're going to be looking at are, first of all, what is flow control? Then comparison and logical operators. We're going to be looking at the if statement and then match case statements, and then finally loops. If you've got any questions as we go along, please put them in the Q&A. I don't want to leave anyone behind. This is a safe space. It should be beginners here, so there are no daft questions. There are just questions because I haven't made things clear. So if you've got any questions, put them in the Q&A. If you put them in the chat, I will try and answer them, but they can get lost, whereas the Q&A has got a functionality for me to keep track. There's also going to be time at the end for further questions as well, if you've got a more general question that's not fitting into the specific topic that I'm talking about. At the end, I'll also post a link to a form so you can leave your feedback, and I am going to put that in the chat now so that if anyone needs to leave early, you can grab that and fill in the form. It's really useful to get student feedback because we're constantly iterating things at Launch School. We love feedback, we read it all. And when I ran the Ruby workshops, people came up with some great ideas, one of which was providing GitHub gists for the code snippets for people who were coding along. So if you've got any great ideas or anything that's not working, like Claire, I can't type that fast, then put it in the feedback and I can address it for the next time that we run this. If you want to code along with me, then please go ahead. I'll be pasting links to GIST so that you can copy and paste the code. But don't worry if you're not going to do that. I mean, particularly if you've only got one screen, it's quite hard to watch this and code. But there's going to be quizzes throughout. I've got 5 quizzes. So it would be interactive anyway. They're just for fun. They're anonymous. I can't see which student answers what question. I can see how many have answered, and I can see like the distribution of answers, but I can't see who answers what. No one's recording it, so don't be shy, just fill it in. We recommend using a Mac, and then Visual Studio Code is your code editor, so that's what I'm going to be using today. If you have a Windows machine, or you need to use AWS Cloud9, that's fine too. Launch School's Python book contains instructions to get Python up and running on those environments. And if you have any problems, as I said last week, you just reach out to us on Slack via the prep course channel. You might not get an answer immediately, but you will get an answer within a few hours. There's always people hanging around on that course. We're a friendly bunch at Launch School. We're always keen to help. So the Slack group, the prep course, that is the place to go for help if you're in the prep course and trying to get things up and running. Environments is always tricky. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of that so that I can have these notes on the right. So the first thing we're going to do is look at what is flow control. So flow control relates to changing the flow of a program away from just executing every line of code from top to bottom to the feedback. Did it really? Okay, so someone said, right, the feedback form just put miscellaneous, and that's a great bit of feedback on the feedback form. I will make a note of that I need to tell whoever manages that form to put Python on there, because I fill in a feedback form as a TA, and I asked for Python to be added onto there. So thank you. First bit of feedback for today. Brilliant. Right. What we're talking about, flow control. So rather than executing every line of code from top to bottom, flow control changes what is executed in different circumstances. So a useful analogy is thinking of flow control. It's like a journey, and then through that journey, there might be forks in the road that require decisions to be made, and they might determine which path you're going to follow. And in Python, that's achieved using conditionals, which can be formed using if statements with comparison and logical operators to determine which branch you're going to take. You know, is 8 or A bigger or smaller than 5 or whatever. So looking at the flow diagram in the student notes, we would use a conditional here to check whether we'd like to take the scenic route or whether we want to take the long windy roads. So before we start looking at if statements, we're just going to have just a brief look at comparison and logical operators, because obviously it's essential to know how they are working in order to understand how if statements are going to work. So first, a little bit of terminology. The operands are the things being compared. So for this first one, the operands are 4 and 6, and then the comparison operator is the less than symbol. And so that's for a comparison operator. For a logical operator where we've got and or not. Again, we've got this bit here in the brackets is the operand, parentheses. Or in these parentheses, that's the other operand. And then the bit in the middle is the logical operator. Second thing to say is that comparison logical operators return a Boolean value. So they return true or false. And in Python, those Boolean values are capitalized. So let's explore some comparison operators. So I'm sorry if you can hear my cat. I'm in the terminal here, but I want to just write some code without creating a file. So I'm going to go into the REPL, and you do that just by typing Python or Python 3 if your path variable isn't set up. You'll know that because if you type Python and you get gobbledygook up, then try Python 3 instead. So here we go. I can see now I've got those 3 greater than symbols. So now I know I'm in the REPL. I'm not in VS Code. I can just do Command K to just clear the screen so that it's not cluttered. So we're just going to do a few here. So we can do the greater than one that we've been talking about is 2 greater than 7. No, it isn't. So we get false back. We can also compare. I mean, dogs you can train, but how can I train my cat not to meow? So we can also use that to compare strings. Strings are compared kind of alphabetically. So A is considered to be smaller than B. So when we compare them, we get that. Be careful when you're comparing numbers that are actually strings, because Python will compare them character by character. So because the first character is a 4 on both sides, it'll go, okay, I don't know which is bigger. So I'm going to go to the next one. And the next character is 0 on the left-hand side and 2 on the right-hand side. So because 0 is smaller than 2, Python says 402 is smaller than 42. So, I mean, this has caught me out. Be careful when you're comparing numbers that are actually strings, because it's going to compare them character by character. You might not get what you think you should. And if you try to compare a string and an integer, Python says, I don't have that method for comparing those things. It won't allow you. In other languages, they can, they might convert one of those to a number or string. But in Python, if you try to compare a string and a number, Python says, no, you can't do that. They're not the same. So I've done less than, and then obviously there's standard ones. Is 4 greater than or equal to 4? Yes, it is. Another common comparison operator is the equality operator. So we just say, we use two equal signs to say, are these two things the same? So 2 is written, no, it isn't, we get false. I'm going to clear the screen actually, so I'm back up to top. We can use that for strings. So 2 hellos are saying yes, but if I change this to lowercase, Python says no, they're not the same. So when you're comparing strings, it's case sensitive. And then we've also got the not equals to operator. So is 2 not equal to 3? Yes, it is. So that just returns the opposite of whatever the equality operator returns. So those are the comparison operators. So we've got less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, equality or not, or the not equal to. Now we're going to have a look at the logical operators not, and or, and they are useful because they can combine conditions to create like more complex scenarios. So let's just start simply though. So if we do not true, we get false. So it's just giving you the opposite of the Boolean that you'd get. So the opposite of true is false. And we can combine that with maybe an expression in parentheses. So we work out what is inside the parentheses first. So 4, we're using the equality operator to compare it to 5. Well, that's not the same, so that gives false. And then we're doing not false to get the opposite of false, so this will return true. And then we can use an and operator. So if we do 1 is equal to 1 and A is the same as A. So both of these are true, so the and condition is going to return true. But if I change one of them to false, then it returns false. So with and, for it to return true, both of the conditions need to be true, otherwise it will return false. And then for or, if I change that to or, this will be if either of them is true, it will return true, and it will return false only if both of the conditions are false. So enough of me talking, let's have a mini quiz. Now, some of these things are not things that we've explicitly, whoa, no, that's fine. I thought I was showing the answers there. Some of these things are not things that we've explicitly covered, just because it's a little bit boring for me to just keep rattling things off. So give it your best shot, and then I'll explain the new concepts afterwards. And I've put them on the screen, as well as putting them in a Zoom quiz, just because previous feedback has said that sometimes these are not that clear to read in Zoom because I can't do code formatting and stuff. So you've got 7 questions there. Just remember, I can't see what you're answering. And don't worry if you don't know the answers, because it might be a new concept. And I'll go through the answers when you've had a chance to do the questions. Maybe I shouldn't have started the first quiz with 7 questions. It's quite intimidating, isn't it? Let me know if you think it should have been just maybe 2 or 3. It's always a relief to me when I can see some answers coming in, because I know that you can see the quiz. Give you another minute or so, but just put something in the chat if you would like a bit longer. Okay, so let's have a look at the answers. So I can share the results so you can see the distribution of answers, and then I'll bring up the answers here. So for the first one, this is quite straightforward if you're familiar with this. 101 less than 2, no it isn't, so we get false. The second question is 5 greater than or equal to 5.0. This is demonstrating that we can use comparison operators to compare integers and floats. Python can do this and it will return true. Question 3, we're comparing lists. So the equality operator can be used to compare lists. And in Python, lists are considered to be equal if they've got the same elements in the same order. So question 3 returns true, but question 4 returns false because they're in a different order. Again, don't worry if you've got this wrong because different languages do different things. Ruby is the same as this, but Python's different. If you compare 2 lists, which JavaScript calls arrays, and they've got the same things in the same order, JavaScript says no, they're completely different unless they actually are the same one. Question 5, this returns false because the equality operator considers integers and strings to have different values. So the first operand, I'm pointing something you can't see. So the first operand here will return false, and because it's an AND expression, if either is false, then it returns false. Question 6, the first operand will return true because ant is less than b because a is earlier in the alphabet than b, because it's an OR expression. If either of them are true, then it returns true. So this returns true. We don't even need to test the second one. And then the last one is a not. This raises an error because we can't compare 5. We can't compare an integer and a string with a less than operator. So we just get an error. Okay, so like I said, the different combinations of operands and operators are just not something you need to memorize, okay? Just be aware that there are some subtleties to how they work. And so maybe it's not doing quite what you think it is. So if your if statement isn't working as you want it to, it might not be the code around the if statement that's the problem. It might just be your logical or comparison operator isn't working as you expect it. So try it out in the REPL or look at the Python documentation to just check that that's not the problem. The more you use it, the more you get used to it, but just be aware that sometimes these things aren't doing what you'd expect. In some languages, like I say, you can compare integers and strings and the language will do the hard work for you and convert them, but Python doesn't. It will raise an error, so you need to be aware of that. So we're now going to have a look at using these comparison logical operators in an if statement. So the flow diagram in student notes is an example of what we can build using an if statement, and we're going to code the top part. So I'm just going to come out, oops, let's move that back over here. I'm just going to come out of the REPL by doing Control D and then clear the screen. So I want to create a file to put this in. So I'm going to call it bus. So I use the command line command and touch to create the file, and then it's over here. So I'm just going to double click to open it up and then just want to have the file. So I'm going to paste in a gist link. So if you've never been onto GitHub and you don't have an account, it doesn't matter. You can just click on the link, which I'm going to do. And it just comes up here. And then you can just copy that code and then paste it into your file. So you don't have to watch me type, and you don't have to fall behind. So here, let's look at the syntax. So first of all, we're creating a variable destination and we're assigning it to the string London. We've then got an if statement. So we start with if, we then have our conditions. We've got destination and we're comparing it to London. Then that's followed by a colon. Everything then that we want to be executed if that statement is true is then indented by 4 spaces. And here we've got a print command to get on bus. And then outside of that if statement, we can tell it's outside because the indentation has finished. We've then got print this code is outside of the if statement. So make sure you save the file, and then I'm going to execute it. So I'm just going to type Python bus.py and get what we expect. Get on bus, this code is outside the if statement, and we expect that because the destination is equal to London, and so get on bus is going to be executed. Now we're going to elaborate on the example to include an else condition. So I will paste that gist in the chat, and then I'm just going to paste that code in. I'm just going to get rid of that line there just to simplify this example a bit. So I've got my if statement, and then I've just added an else colon and then indented that else branch to print something else. And I'm going to change the destination. I'm going to change, we don't want to go to London. Let's go to Paris. Okay, so now this if statement isn't evaluating to true, so this isn't going to happen. So let's see that. I'll save the file, and if we execute it, we're going to get wait for next bus, which is what we expected. So if the if condition doesn't evaluate to true, then the else condition is executed. In addition to an else branch, if statements can also have multiple elif branches. So again, we'll paste that into the chat. Here, I'm going to change this file quite a bit, so I'm just going to paste over all of it. Let's widen this a bit. So again, we've still got the destination is Windy Nook. We're going to compare it to London. If that's true, we're going to say get on a bus and go home. If it's not true, we're going to do elif. And note that it's elif and not else if, but that's what it means, else if. So if the if doesn't return true, then check the next elif branch. We're going to check it against Windy Nook. If the destination is Windy Nook, we'll have grab a coat. That one doesn't, we'll check the next one. If it's Paris, don't be silly, can't get a bus to Paris. And then if none of them evaluate true, we'll do the else condition. Okay, so here we can see the destination is Windy Nook, so we are expecting grab a coat to be output. So let's do that, and we get grab a coat. So if we want a branch to do nothing, which sometimes we do, instead of having code to do something, we can just use pass. So if you do pass, then it will not check any of the other branches, but it won't do anything either because there's nothing in that branch to execute. So it's just does communicate to anyone looking at your code that you know that if you end up on that branch, you want nothing to happen. So now if I do that and go back and execute code, we can see nothing happened, nothing was output. One last thing I wanted to mention is that if multiple branches have the same condition, so we've got both the if and the elif, the first elif for checking for Windy Nook. Once Python finds one branch, the first branch, that evaluates to true, it won't check any of the others. So here, if we do this, we will get on the bus and go home. It won't check the second one. And I suppose we couldn't see that because it was fast. Let's print grab a coat. And that needs to not be capitalized. Okay, so now if we do it, we just get on the bus and go home, and we don't get the grab a coat. So Python will just execute the first branch that returns true. This is an anti-pattern in terms of you should not do this. When you're doing an if statement, they should be mutually exclusive so that it's clear that only one of them you want to execute in any one situation. But just know that if you do accidentally do it, Python will only execute the first one that it comes across. Okay, right, so we've done if statements. Let's now have a quiz on if statements. So I've got some let's just clear this. So I've got some code snippets on the screen that this relates to. There's just 3 questions for this. Give this a go, and then I'll go through the answers. Yeah, I'll just give another 30 seconds or so. Oh, I can see everyone's participated. Need to wait for 8 seconds. Right, let's share the results. Then bring up the answers. So for this first one, the if condition returns false because we're comparing fruit to grapes. Everyone got this right. Okay, so I don't like fruit and I'm sad it's not grapes. And we've used an F string here to interpolate that variable inside there. Right, everyone got that right. Clearly you're all paying attention because everybody got question 2 right as well. So what is this one demonstrating? This is just demonstrating that you can put if statements on a single line, which is really elegant, really nice. Just be careful that when you do this, it is readable. So if the line is getting really long, just split it over 2 lines. Also, when you put a single line into the REPL, you need to press enter twice to get the code to execute, which caught me out. So if you put an if statement on one line in the REPL, press enter twice to get it to execute. Okay, and then the last question, question 3. Again, star students here. This returns true, so that branch is the second elif branch is executed. And this is just demonstrating that we can use logical operators in branches of if statements as well as comparison operators. Well, great. Should have made the questions harder. So let's move on to match case statements. Right. Slightly different scenario here. So match statements work exactly the same way as if statements, so you guys are going to have no problems with it. It's just got a slightly different syntax, but it is relatively new, this syntax. So if you're working in an older version of Python, i.e. before 3.10, which I think is what Cloud9 is currently using, you won't have match case statements. Now, it doesn't matter because everything you can do with a match case, you can do with an if statement. It's just a little bit more efficient in terms of lines of code, and you'll see that. So I'm just going to paste in the gist link for this here and change my bus example. Whoops. So we're still declaring a variable destination and we're assigning it to Paris. Then rather than an if statement, we've got a match statement. And we do match and then the variable that we're checking and then a colon. Then underneath that indented, we have each of our cases. So each of our like branches as we had in if. And here we don't need to say, you know, destination equals London, because we've got destination in the match part of it. So in the case part of it, we can just do the value or the variables, we're comparing variables, do whatever it is that we want it to compare to, then a colon, and then indented is the code that you want to be executed. So if destination is equal to London, we output get on bus. If destination is equal to Windy Nook, we do grab a coat, etc. The equivalent of an else branch, so what you want to be executed if none of the previous branches are true, is you use an underscore, and that's works exactly like the else branch, and it's exactly like the else branch in that you don't have to have one, so it's optional. But if you do have one and none of the other cases return true, then the last underscore one is the one that will be executed. So here we've got Paris, so we're expecting here to get, don't be silly, you can't get the bus to Paris from where I am. Might be different if you're in somewhere in France. So don't be silly, you can't get a bus. Yeah, so it works exactly the same as an if statement. It just saves on code because you don't have to keep writing destination equals. Maybe it's a bit more readable, especially when you've got lots of different branches. But it is functionally equivalent to an if statement. So if the version that you've got doesn't have this, just use an if statement. So let's do this is one of the last one. Let's do a quiz on case statements. So here is that code. Let's come out of there. So case statement. Have a go at this quiz. Another 3 questions for you. Okay, some of the syntax might be slightly different to what you've seen before. Again, this is just, it's just more interesting you figuring it out rather than me telling you everything. I think these questions are a bit trickier than the ones in the last quiz. So don't worry if you're scratching your head a bit more over these. Certainly getting more of a spread of answers. Right, well done, everyone. Let's have a look at the answers. So the first example, this is demonstrating what happens if none of the conditions are met and there's no default branch. Nothing happens. There isn't an error. It's just like when if a statement has no branches executed, it's just nothing is going to be output. For question 2, so because neither of the first 2 case statements return true, we get the last one, tennis rackets, and this is demonstrating that this string comparison is case sensitive. So we've got snow with the capital S is assigned to weather, but we're checking whether or not in the first case statement, whether or not snow with a lowercase s is the value of weather, and it isn't, and then it isn't rain, so the default one is executed, so we get tennis rackets. Okay, and then oops, someone else. It's because I want to use this one. Then the last question we've got, this is going to output coolest language in the world. That pipe syntax enables us to match multiple values in a particular branch. So again, this is where this would be really nice, I think, compared to an if statement, because you can effectively have all of these ors. Under the hood, I found out this is using some sort of pattern matching, which is why we're not using the logical OR operator. I mean, that's as far as I went on it. Don't worry about it. Just take the syntax for granted. It's nice. If you want to check multiple things on the same branch, use a pipe. It's really neat. So yeah, I learned something new writing this workshop. Great. So let's move on to loops. So far we've just looked at if and match case statements, and they still work top to bottom. They just allow us to skip chunks, whereas loops allow us to execute lines of code repeatedly. So we're going to explore two main looping structures provided by Python, and we're going to look at for and we're going to look at while. So first, we're just going to create a simple while loop based on, no, it's going to be a bit simpler than what we've got there. So I'm going to create a new file. Let's call it waiting. So I'm just going to go to here, open. So I'm in waiting. We're going to paste in the gist link. Anyone that's coding along. It's just 3 lines of code here. So we're going to look at the syntax. We've created a, just so it separates it. We've created a variable counter. We've assigned it to 0. Then we've got our while condition. So we're creating a while loop here. So while true and then colon. And then whatever is indented from there, we've got a print statement, will be executed. And it will be executed as long as each time it comes round, we keep getting true. So let's have a look to see how that's working. So we're going to run that file. You see, it just keeps going. So to get out of this, we do Control C. Very important to know how to get out of an infinite loop because it happens. So Control C to get out of it. Now this happened, as I said, because we created an infinite loop. True is always going to evaluate to true. So once we get into this while thing here, we're just going to keep going around and keep printing 0. So what we want to do is add a condition that's eventually going to return false so that our while loop will finish. So I'm just going to check whether or not the counter is less than or equal to 5. And then make sure that I increment that counter each time. So I can do counter equals counter +1. So that would increment it each time. And actually, there's this nice syntax where we can use plus equals. It's exactly the same time. This is called augmented assignment. So it's exactly the same, saying counter equals counter +1. It's just a shortcut way of doing it. And this is a shortcut that lots of languages have. So it's not particular to Python. It's just called augmented assignment. It's quite neat. So if we just save that and then execute the file, let's just clear that. Now we can see we get numbers 0 to 5 being output. So we can see because we start with 0, so we print the counter, then we increment the counter to 1. So then we print 1, then it goes to 2, 3, 4, 5. Then when counter gets to 6, we go back round and counter is no longer less than or equal to 5. So we stop executing the while loop, and so 6 is an output. Now going to explore a while loop with a more complicated example that follows that flow diagram. So I'm going to paste that again in the chat and then copy the code and paste it in here. So we've got a variable time until bus we're assigning to 4. Then we've got while. So while time until bus is greater than 0, colon, then what we want to be executed in our while. We're going to time until bus, we're doing this augmented assignment again, but instead of adding, we're taking away. So it's going to go 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We're then going to print something, so we're going to use an F string so we can interpolate that variable time until bus. So we'll get a countdown of how many minutes until the next bus. And then on the last line, when we come out of the while loop, we're going to print bus arrived all aboard. So let's save that and then just check it's working as we expect. So it is, so we get 3 minutes until the next bus, 2, 1, 0, and then bus has arrived. Okay, now to control while loops here, we've used this conditional conditional expression. But to control them, we can also use a couple of keywords. There's continue and break. Now, continue will just skip the rest of the code in the while loop and just start at the next iteration, whereas break just terminates the while loop early and just comes out as if the while condition was no longer met and you come out. So we're going to, first of all, add a continue to our code. I've labeled this incorrectly. So it says while we break. This is actually while we continue, I hope. So let's see how much I'm changing. I'm changing enough, so I'm just going to copy the whole thing. Right. So I can get this all on one screen. So we've still got our time until bus. We're assigning that, initializing it to 4, and then we're decrementing it. So it's going to go down 4, 3, 2, 1 here. We've then got an if branch in here, which we've added. So if the time till the bus is 1, we're going to print something and then continue. So we're going to skip, when time until bus is 1, we're going to skip the rest of the while loop. So we're not going to do the thing down here and we're going to go round. But when time until bus isn't equal to 1, then we will execute this code down here to get the time until bus. And then when the while loop is exited completely, we'll get bus arrived all aboard. So we can see how this behaves differently to how it was before, because when it's equal to 1, we're going to get a slightly different message. Well, we're going to get a different message. So let's clear. No, I think I'll leave that there so we can see the difference. So we get the 3 minutes and 2 minutes, but we don't get the 1 minute because we continued that. We put out a different message. Bus is nearly here. Stop looking at the phone. And then it skipped the rest of the loop and then went round again. And then we got the last one. And then we got the message right at the end as well. So the continue just skips the rest of the loop, but then goes back up to the beginning of the while loop. And then if we change that continue into a break instead, when Python gets to a break, it comes out completely. So it won't execute this line here. And it won't go back round and decrement it because it's just going to come out of the while loop. It's as if the while loop is now evaluated to false. Yeah, so it just kicks you out of it. So if I've saved that already. So if I execute this now, compared to the other two, we're getting 3 minutes until the next bus, 2 minutes until the next bus. Then we get the bus is nearly here. Stop looking at your phone, but we don't get that 0 minutes until next bus because the break made us come out, so we didn't go back round and get to time until bus equals 0. So those are the two different things that continue and break do. The more you play with them, the more they make sense. Just remember that continue just skips the rest, goes back round, break just takes you out of the while loop. but it doesn't take you out of the file. It just takes you out of the while loop. So now we're going to have a look at a for loop. These have got the same purpose as while loops, but I've got a neat syntax for iterating over collections. I love a for loop, and I really like this about Python because it is just so neat. So what I can do, I no longer need to initialize that variable. Rather than having this condition, I can use a for loop. So I'm going to do for time until bus in, and then put the values that I want it to look at with a colon. So let's make this a bit wide. Okay. I now no longer need this line of code here. I don't need to decrement it anymore. So I don't need to initialize it up here. And then I replace my while condition, my while expression with a for expression instead. And then I no longer need to decrement. And then other than that, this will be the same as it was before. So if I execute that, we can see that we're getting the 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, the bus is nearly here. And we're getting the 4 minutes, which we weren't getting before, because before we were decrementing the value before we did it. So if I wanted it to be exactly the same, I would start at 3. So then I've got it exactly the same. 3 minutes, 2 minutes, bus is nearly here, bus arrived, all aboard. So you can see it's quite neat. If I just get rid of these things, we can see it's quite a bit shorter. And maybe it's more obvious what we're trying to do. We're more in control of it. We want time until bus to be to have the values of 3, 2, 1, and 0. And we can see that here. It is awesome, isn't it? It's really, really neat. For loops, you can do anything with a for loop. And so that Python's got this neat one, just makes life easy. Okay, so that's all you need to know about a for loop. So we're now going to have a quiz on loops. So again, I've got 3 questions. Let's come out of here so you can't cheat. And then start. Oh, start that. So this is it's not the last quiz because I always have a quiz at the end. But do your best with this. Yeah, and there might be some unfamiliar syntax here. Yes, there is. Just keep you on your toes. There is quite a lot of code to think about there, isn't there? And this is quite, I think this is quite hard to just be doing this in your head and not be running the code. So it's a good test. So I'll give you another 30 seconds and then I'll go through the answers. If you need longer, I'll put something in the chat. Meanwhile, everyone else can look at the, oh no, she's turned around. It's the head of my cat, just there. She's fallen asleep now, stop me anymore. Okay, let's have a look at the answers then. I'm going to share that. So bring up the answers. Just make this smaller. Maybe it's overlapping. Right, so question 1. Here, this loop is decrementing until days is equal to 0. So while days is bigger than 0, it's going to keep going, but as soon as it hits 0, it's going to come out. Therefore, days until payday is going to be output when days is equal to 3, 2, and 1. And so 3 messages are output before it's payday. Yeah, because it's not going to output it when it's 0. Question 2. This is incrementing in steps of 5 until the sunflower height is greater than 20. So that's going to happen when it hits 25. Then when it hits 25, that if condition is going to be met. So the code will output I'm all grown, and then it will come out of the while loop. So I'm all grown is going to be the last message that is output. It's going to hit 25 and then come out. Then question 3, this is demonstrating looping over a string. Again, isn't this neat? So just as we did for iterating over a list, we can just do for variable name in string, and Python will go through each character in that string. So first of all, char will be P, then it will be Y, then it will be T, H-O-N. So here, if char is H, then continue. So we won't get that print char line executed. So this is going to print char for everything except the H. So that's going to be 5. It's going to be 5 letters that are output because it's going to be P, Y, T, O, and N. That's quite tricky because you've not seen that before. But again, it just demonstrates quite a neat way of iterating over strings. You don't need to split them into a list to iterate over them. You can just do a for loop and it will hit every character in the string. It's really useful. Okay, so, oh, I didn't show it up here. Here we go. Right, that was the last topic for this workshop. So what have we learned? We've looked at flow control. What is it? So it's not going from top to bottom, executing every line of code. It might be skipping some or going around. We looked at comparison logical operators. This is what we need when we are using these flow control statements. Then we looked at an if statement, then a match case statement, which is functionally the same as an if statement, which is a bit neater. And then we looked at while and for loops. Now, don't worry if you didn't follow all of it. That was a lot of information to take in 1 hour. But the more times you're exposed to things, the more familiar it will become. So if you've got any questions, now is the time to put them in the Q&A. And then while I'm waiting for those to come in, I'm going to give you one last roundup quiz. Again, I've got 3 code examples there, but there's 6 questions. So there's some questions that are just words and aren't based on examples. So give this a go. If you've got any questions, this is the time to put them in the Q&A. And I will answer the questions after we go through the answers for this one. So I can see I've already got a question in and I will answer it when I've gone through this quiz. coming up to the hour. So anyone needs to leave, put the feedback form in the chat so you can grab it. Please fill it in. Let me know what worked. Let me know what didn't. Okay, I'll give you another 30 seconds. Let me know if you need longer. Oh, everyone's participated, so I don't need to give you longer. So let's have a look at the answers. So for the first question, neither the if or the elif branch return true because the number is 20. So we get the, everyone's got this right. So yeah, we get perfect. Question 2, again, everyone's got this right. We've got big triangles. So the first case statement is matched. So we get all grown up. Then question 3. Here, so count is initialized to 0, and then we've got a while true. So it's just going to keep going until we hit a break statement. So we're going to print count. So we're going to go 0, and then if count is greater than or equal to 2, break, and then increment it. So we're going to do 0, that's not met. Count becomes 1. Then we get 1. Count is not greater than or equal to 2, so that's not met. So then it goes to 2. Then we print 2. Now count is greater than or equal to 2 because it's 2, and so we're going to break out of it. So the last number that's output is 2, because when it equals 2, we get 2 output, and then it breaks out of it. Then questions 4, 5, and 6. So what is flow control? This changes the flow of a program execution away from just top to bottom. So without flow control, Python will just execute each line of code from top to bottom, every line of code. But when we introduce flow control, we can skip chunks of it or keep going around. So it changes the flow of a program execution away from just top to bottom. Then I can see everyone knows that 7.0 is the same as 7, and everyone knows that bus is less than taxi. Of course it is, because a taxi is much better than a bus. Excellent. So I am now, I've got one question in, and that was to go back to the last question of the last quiz. So this one probably didn't help that I didn't have it up when I was explaining it. But actually, I can copy the code from here. So let's leave that up. So what's going to happen with this? So let's just paste the code in here. So we're doing for char, for character in Python. Then we're going to go around. If the character is equal to H, then continue. So skip the rest of it. Don't print that the character that you're on and then go round. So first of all, character is going to be P. If P is equal to H, or P isn't equal to H, so we're going to print the character. So we're going to print P, then Y, then T. Then when it gets to H, it's not going to print H because it's going to continue. So it won't do line 3. Then character is O and then it's N. So we're going to print PYTON. So let's just have a look at that in action. So we get PYTON. Because when character is H, it's going to do continue, so it skips the rest of the for loop. So I hope that answers the question. And it didn't help that I didn't have the oh, that one I was doing. Right, so if no one's got you're welcome. So if no one's got any other questions, that's the end of this. Don't forget to fill in the feedback form. It's in the chat, and I should bring up my last slide. Oh no, it's not my last slide. I've got 2 slides. So today we've covered flow control and loops. Next time we're going to look at lists, dictionaries, and sets. So these are collections of data that we looked at when we looked at data. They're data structures that you're going to use a lot in Python, and there are loads of methods built into Python to interact with them, which is one of the things that makes Python such a great language. So next week is going to be quite fun because it is using all of these built-in methods and playing around with them and seeing all the useful things they do. So you don't have to build your own for loop to change what is in a list or a dictionary or a set. You can use these built-in ones. Yeah, so make sure you tune in. Same time next week, list, dictionaries and sets. And in the meantime, please fill in the feedback form, which I've probably said loads already. Yeah, great. So well, you've all done brilliantly in the quizzes. You've answered all of it. Yeah, I'm really excited to see you all next week. So enjoy the rest of your day, whatever time it is for you. It's 11 o'clock at night for me. So it's the weekend. Yeah, see you all next week. Goodbye.